What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's podcast. We have Allison Melkie, who is a balance counselor out of San Antonio, Texas. I thought it was a really great podcast today. Learned a lot about our behaviors, anxieties, why they're there, how we can shut them off. How do you curb your need for food? How do you curb your need, to be safe in your own environment and to kind of get over your anxieties? So I thought it was a really good balanced discussion and kind of talked a little about, we even got into some bear discussions and killing bears and running away from bears and what that meant for us today. So really fun podcast. It was really inspirational, and hopefully you folks enjoyed this week. I thought it was really good as far as getting down into the understanding of our own minds and behaviors and how we can curb that to either be more healthier nutrition and fitness or being able to overcome addiction or things that we have in our lives that are causing us to really kind of fall down. So enjoy the podcast this week, and this is another great episode of Hacking Your Health.
You know that there has had to have been some sacrifice, whether it's time or nutrition or whatever it is.
Recording of myself talking about having a relationship with my chest.
I'm Ben Canning.
I'm Dave Kennedy.
And this is Hacking Health Podcast. Yo, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to episode 105. As promised in the last episode, we are joined this week by Allison. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having
me. First of all, you can introduce yourself, and then secondly, I think we can just get straight into, I guess, the narrative that I want to get through in this conversation is mainly around behaviors around nutrition, behaviors around eating, whether that's emotional eating, stress eating, and things like that. So I think if we just sort of get into that, I think there'll be plenty of value for people listening.
Sounds good. Well, I'm Allison Melkie. I am a licensed professional counselor in the great state of Texas. And I've been in practice for about 15 years now, kind of bounced in and out of a few areas of therapy that a lot of people probably don't even know exist. But I've been in private practice for about 8 years with a little break in the middle where I went to corporate America and realized my mistake and came back to private practice. So I've been consistently at this one practice for 5 years now. And I love working with clients who struggle with anxiety, panic, phobias. That's kind of my wheelhouse and a lot of where I derive a lot of my energy from as a therapist. But certainly, depression is not uncommon either. And then love, this sounds strange, but I love working with people who are going through grief. That's another big passion of mine, that the grief and loss journey is so powerful. I love it. I love to walk through that with them. And then women's issues, that's another big one. So lots of postpartum stuff with new moms trying to juggle it all, like myself, working full time, having kids, the whole thing. And so that's a lot of what my practice focuses on. So that's, basically the overview.
Perfect.
It's very, very, very important. If you look at depression numbers and just in today, we're the highest depression rates we've ever seen, and then you take COVID and all the other, kind of lingering issues that came from that, anxiety. Super important, not to make light of any of that situation, but why is it that I always have to beat Ben on everything that I do? Is that a emotional issue that I'm going through here? But
definitely something to it, but I think that's probably, we'll delve into that in a different conversation. The one thing actually that really resonated with what you said is about going through the journey with the person, and I think Dave can relate to that. That's one of the first things that I ever said to him, and I say with any client, okay, yes, I'll expect them to do the work and do the bits and pieces, but I'm there with them throughout. So I think that that's a huge part of a success with any client in any capacity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't have the magic wand, of course, neither do you, right? We've got the tools and we have the training and we can disseminate that, but ultimately the client has to do the work. And, I give people the metaphor a lot, especially when they haven't been in counseling. This is one that I think resonates with them a lot, is like, listen, you and I are in a car together and we're going where you are taking us. You know where we're going. you're not always fantastic at getting us there, though. And so if I can kind of remind you that last time we took a left turn and sort of where that, landed us, maybe this time let's take a right and see what happens. But you're going to know, and I trust that you're going to get us there. I just need to kind of, help. So it is a journey. You're right.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And starting off, I guess, in the basics, what do you find as being at least some of the most effective ways that you have success with people, let's just say struggling with addiction or food, like we talked about here before. I know our bodies aren't necessarily designed to have access to, high caloric, sugary type of foods that aren't really in nature. And then obviously the addiction side of that, full disclosure, I used to be, obese. I was in the 330 or 300, I think 317 was the highest I've ever gotten pound wise. But, working with Ben, been able to, get control of that, my food and nutrition. What's been most effective, I think, when you start, listening to clients around what kind of resonates with them to where they start actually putting the work in. It doesn't need to be like food and nutrition, but just in general, what causes them to change?
So yeah, full disclosure. I mean, I was there too. I wasn't ever considered obese, but I definitely struggled with a lot of overeating, a lot of binge eating when I was in my mid-20s. And so going through therapy, as the client at that time, and now, to answer your question, what is really going on though? It's not the food, right? And it's the same with most addictions. It's not the cocaine, it's not the marijuana, it's not the alcohol, it's not the gambling, it's not the porn. It's what's going on behind this. Yes, we have to manage the symptoms because of course they can be incredibly destructive, but what is causing this to begin with? That's what we start to work on. And when we can really learn how to resolve a lot of those issues or tap into like, how did we get here in the first place? Then that's when you start to see some of the changes. But I think with food in particular, I mean, you guys know there's a stigma with it. There's such a shame and guilt cycle with it, and you have to eat, so we don't need heroin, right? And as difficult as that is for people to stop using, you can't stop eating. I mean, we all know what happens when that happens. So that's why there's so much shame and guilt wrapped into it. And so if we can also kind of figure out how to bust up a lot of that self-talk, right? That negative self-talk that propels you and keeps you into that shame. I think that's another piece too. So
I think that's interesting. So it's like, with any addiction, as you said, it is the case of you can do without that one thing, but you can't do it without food. And actually related to a story, I don't know if you've heard of the Dead Rabbit in New York. It's a guy who's actually from Belfast, two guys from Belfast that went over to open it. And one of the guys that runs it, Jack, is an alcoholic, but he has to taste alcohol to continue to do his job. And I remember hearing the story, my brother was talking to him. He basically tastes the alcohol and spits it out. And I was like, imagine being in that position where you are a former alcoholic, but you still have to put yourself in the position where you taste the alcohol and you can't do it. So I guess it's a similar sort of situation with the food piece.
That's wild. Yeah. And, I'm not an eating disorder specialist, so I want to be completely transparent with that. So, if somebody comes in with anorexia, bulimia, I definitely have to, because that gets into medical issues too, right? So I definitely refer them out. But yeah, that can be a part of some serious eating disorders too, where they will like chew the food, but then spit it out, which again, you definitely have to specialize in that because that's a whole other ball of wax. But yeah, I mean, imagine that parallel. That's wild. Yeah,
for sure.
So when you look at some of the I know one of the big areas from San Antonio, one of the main areas you focus on too is anxiety. I know we deal a lot with that in the security industry specifically. Just the nature of our business, we're generally, a lot of us are on spectrum in one way or another. We have to deal with high stress situations, a lot of lack of sleep, a lot of bad habits. And then on top of it, we're very reclusive in nature of staying inside of our houses and working on the computer and not socializing. What are you seeing from, an anxiety perspective that's really changed over the past few years, and how do people start to kind of look at that? I know every case is different and every person is different, right? But, are there some common themes with anxiety across the board? And the reason I bring that up, especially from the health side of the house, is that I know a lot of folks won't even go out of their house to, do gym work or be active because, they're more comfortable inside of kind of their home domain. So, how do people start to kind of like look at that and kind of fight through some of the anxiety issues that they have?
Yeah, that's a big question with a lot of, I have a lot of thoughts on that one because then, I would have my normal response, but then you have to throw in COVID
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
isolation and the quarantining and the kind of introversion that a lot of people got really comfortable with, right? Yeah, I have quite a few clients, mostly men in the tech industry. And I mean, you kind of listed all of it, right? A lot of them work from home, high pressure jobs, security clearances where half of them can't exactly tell me what they do, not sleeping a whole lot, not prioritizing exercise because, of course, it feels like there's no time. So yeah, that's sort of the short of the long answer. I think is it's a it's an to me it's kind of this it's not like it's unique in that no other profession has these things, but
Sure.
you've got all of them sort of wound up into one profession. And
Yeah.
certainly in South Texas it's too hot to go outside on your lunch break and go walk. I mean, I'm not going to do that, so I'm not going to recommend that to a client, right? So you
You
add
don't, you
that
don't like
as well.
120-degree heat in the desert? I mean,
Hey, I do go to CrossFit in the afternoon, so at some
oh
point you
boy.
got to prioritize your health, okay? But not everybody's there. So, I mean, if you're not going to walk your dog at noon, you're not going to go walk yourself. But yeah, that's a big question with a lot of answers. So, you tell me, what am I seeing with ask me piece by piece.
Well, I think when you talk to folks, like there's a lot of social anxiety for one. So like when we have
Absolutely.
conferences, things like that. Two of the big ones that come up is imposter syndrome. Comes up quite a bit in our profession, where
Yeah,
folks feel like they're not good enough to be in our industry, or they're not
right.
smart enough, or don't have the confidence in themselves. The second one is definitely the social anxiety around either A, going to a gym, or B, going to social events like conferences and things to that effect. I ran a cybersecurity conference for a number of years that had thousands of people. And, I would notice, individuals basically kind of like one person sitting in the corner, looking at the rest of the crowd, but couldn't make, the connection to come over and talk to people. So I'd go over and start talking to them and, make them feel more comfortable. But, a lot of these folks have a lot of anxiety and trouble just, communicating on a social level, because most of their job and responsibilities is, working, heavily technical, type of roles where they're, continuously crashing their brain. And I'll tell you one thing that's funny is, I do a lot of programming and things like that. When I'm in a programming mode, I don't want to talk to humans, and it takes me a while to actually like come back to reality and actually realize that I'm not in computer land anymore. So like, I'm like short, my wife's like, "Are you upset or something?" I'm like, "Oh, no, no, no. I'm just thinking about stuff in my head. Like I can't get off of that, so there's a lot of taxing on the brains. But I think what the question here is, how do folks that struggle socially with anxiety, even just getting out of the house and going to like the gym, how do you start to build success around that to make yourself more comfortable with those types of scenarios? And I'm sure it's a slow over time process. But what are some tools that you can arm people with to at least start to take the first plunge? Obviously, going to see you would be awesome, to be able to work with you. But what are some tips that people can use?
Are you trying to get some free therapy here? What's going on?
Hey, I already
That's what we're both here
Oh,
for.
okay. Right. Yeah, I slept through that one really quickly. Thanks. Well, okay. So anxiety, I think first of all, out the gate, I'm not going to overly nerd out clients and explain to them all the nitty gritty of anxiety because they won't come back, right? But ultimately, we start to do some psychoeducation, is what we call it. What is anxiety in the first place? Why is it healthy actually to have a fear response? A lot of new clients come in and they say, I don't want to be anxious anymore. And it's like, well, I need you to be anxious at times when it's appropriate, because this is how we've made it as a species for thousands of years, right?
Sure.
So it's useful. And not even in a fear response situation, but think about, anytime you're hyping up for some big event. I mean, you guys were just in Vegas not that long ago. I mean, you do get nervous. You get that nervous excitement, right? it hypes you up, it gets you going, it gets some of that excitement about you that allows you to perform. So I always educate them about the, we don't want to get rid of this stuff. We need it, but we need it to be appropriate. And the other thing that I'll talk about, because I think especially in those social situations, you can kind of feel panicky, right? Like the longer I'm around these people, I feel that shortness of breath and heart racing and all of those normal responses, and people just want to run, right? They don't want to stay in the room, like you're saying, that guy in the corner. But we talk a lot about anxiety being a temporary feeling, and that the longer you sit with it, it will go away. But you have to be willing to push through it. And so there's a lot of early resistance to that, right? Because if you told me, I'm going to need you to go ride this roller coaster and be afraid of it, I'm not going to do it. That's terrifying to me. I don't want to do that, right? But what
so
are
you're
your...
saying I should not have told my son to do that? Yeah.
Yes.
Never mind your son. You told me to do it. You brought me in. You put me in the front row.
That too, but I didn't tell you it was gonna be scary. I was just like, hey, it's gonna be fun. And
that was a lie. It was a lie.
That was right. Yeah. But what happened after, Ben? Was it like, was it fun?
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah,
right.
I survived. I made it. It was a good story. It was a good time.
I just remember Ben saying that, we've made mistakes as we were about to go down the first minutes of hill. So yeah.
Right. And that's exactly it. I mean, you were probably terrified. I can only imagine front row on a roller coaster, like yeah.
It wasn't, this is Cedar Point. This is like, the largest roller coasters in the world. Yeah. And I took him on the tallest, most fastest roller coaster in the world.
It was the conversation was, so you've never been on roller coasters before? I know exactly where to start. We'll start at the worst possible one. But I made it through. It was fine. It was fine. Yeah, it was fine.
It's downhill. You can tackle anything now.
That's what I say. You go all in on the hardest one ever, and then the rest of it's easy, right? That's what I was looking at.
Well, I mean, hey, it wasn't a bad strategy because, one, you ended up having a good time, we think.
Yeah.
And and now it's all downhill.
Ben fell asleep in the car ride 5 minutes after we hit the seat.
Yeah.
We call that an adrenaline dump, right?
Yes, it definitely was that for sure.
Yeah. So just a lot of like demystifying this. And also I talk a lot about like normalizing anxiety symptoms. So with people that are kind of really crippled by that idea of like an elevated heart rate or increased breathing, we talk about exercise because that's a great way to learn how to tolerate bodily sensations like that. Like if I go for a half a mile run right now, my heart rate will increase, my breathing will be shallower and increase. That's normal. Your body is doing what it's supposed to do. So if you're feeling anxious about something and your heart rate increases, your breathing is a little bit more shallow and rapid, the more you kind of recognize that is an okay response to whatever's happening, then you can tolerate it better. Right?
It's almost like reprogramming your brain to understand that, like, hey, this is okay. Something that was either previously traumatic or an unknown. I know a lot of folks that are doing something for the very first time presents anxiety or even resistance. Our brains work that way. It's very smart. Hey, we're living fine right now. We have the adequate food. Why would we want to go and do something else that is going to be brand new for us to go and learn? We're good, that's right. It's interesting because I've been in this industry now for 20 plus years. And when I first started off my career, I remember going and giving public speaking the first time. And I was a nervous wreck. I was more of an introvert as well. I programmed a lot. I loved coding. I loved, the hacking side of the house. And that's what really got me into this industry. And then, all of a sudden I'm presenting in front of, I think the first presentation I gave was in front of like 100 people. And, that's nerve wracking because you're doing something that you've never done before. But each time I kept doing it, it got easier and easier and easier. And then I'm speaking in front of 3 or 4 or 5,000 people at the Penn and Teller room at DEF CON, right? One of the largest hacker conferences.
Yeah.
And it just gets easier over time as you start to do these things more methodically. It doesn't mean that I don't get nervous, by the way.
Right.
But I don't think the world is ending and that, the world's going to collapse on me because of it. So, as you try things more and more and become more comfortable with it. Another good example just recently is that, I had a lot of nervousness going to the gym just originally. And then Ben introduced going to the gym with a camera person, which
That's my version of throwing you in at the deep end.
I was definitely front row. That was definitely that's the reason why I paid him back front row in the roller coaster ride there.
There you go. I like it.
That and the first time we went to a haunted house, the blackout night where there was no lights and we had people like throwing us against walls. But
you can tell we've got a really dysfunctional relationship going on here.
How can I scare the shit out of my friend?
That's right. Yeah. No, but I mean that piece there around going to the gym and having people like highlight on me and judge me for a camera being there, like why do they have a camera and who are they and that type of stuff, like really terrified the living hell out of me, even though I've spoken in front of thousands of people and that type of stuff. So you kind of pound through it and you go over it, and you finally overcome those fears and you recognize, hey, nothing bad happened, we're good. And I think a lot of it is just kind of getting yourself worked up and then having to kind of overcome that. And I'm sure it's the same for eating. It was for me. One thing that was really successful to get into the nutritional side was one, understanding what I ate and the calories in versus calories out. But two, putting me into a framework or system surrounded by kind of a tribe of similar folks that were struggling with the same thing. And you think about that towards like Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, those types of things, right? So people that have gone through the same thing, have already overcome it or are going through the same thing currently, was really helpful with that system compiled with the knowledge, really allowed me to home in and be able to take control of my nutrition and my health and what I ate, right? Do you find that the same with other dilemmas that folks work with? Do frameworks work for people? Do finding similar folks to be able to relate to, obviously, going to a counselor and being able to express your emotions and why that's, why you're having issues with that, to be able to kind of free up your mind and instead of bottling up, what are some of the most effective things there?
Well, absolutely. I think that you've described a couple things here just perfectly. I mean, one, exposure therapy. The more we expose ourselves to the thing that we're afraid of, it lessens the intensity every time until, it becomes normal. So you work with somebody who has a phobia of driving, you don't start by telling them to drive to the end of the street. You start by having them sit in the driver's seat. You don't even turn the car on. And we sit and we sit and we sit until that anxiety level comes down and it's notable for them. Next time we, start with, okay, what's your anxiety at? Let's say a 10. Okay, now we're going to turn the car on. And we sit with it and we sit with it and we sit with it. Okay, now it's at a 5. All right, turn the car off. Now we turn the car on. We put it in a drive. It's measured exposure until the next thing you know, these people are driving their kids to school in rush hour traffic. So when you said that perfectly with public speaking, number one fear or number one phobia that people have is public speaking. And of course, you still get butterflies before you go on stage. That's just maybe that little bit performance kind of excitement / nervousness. Yep. The brain doesn't like unknowns. Brains like certainty. This is why people are terrible at change. You change my schedule my daughter just ballet just kicked off again for the school year, and they changed her schedule because she leveled up, which is a fantastic thing, right? But I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't. These are new times, and how am I going to fit in my workout, and when am I going to feed her, and how's she going to do homework? It's day 2, and we've already figured it out, right? So brains don't like change. The more we do the thing and the more we show the brain that it's okay, it will let go of that. Second part of what you're saying, absolutely accountability. This, people know this. They just kind of don't think about it. Community, like-minded people doing similar things. This is why we know that support groups generally work as long as you show up to them, because you're not alone. And what a shameful thing, right? Overeating, emotional eating. You don't want to just tell everybody that you're doing this. So if you're sitting in a group or on a Zoom with 5 other people that are doing the same thing as you, it makes it okay. It validates your own struggle. And so, people need to be where other people with similar things are. And you need to just keep doing it. It's like, you go to the social event, you can't leave. You have to just be willing to feel super uncomfortable. Ben, you couldn't get off the roller coaster.
I couldn't. I was in. Once I was in, I was in.
Yeah, no. And so what a miserable way to try to resolve some anxiety, but I suppose it worked,
While you see miserable, I see laughing and
Exhilarating.
hysterical for me. So it was a bit very much.
He's like throwing up and you're just laughing.
This is great. This is the best thing I've ever done.
I think
Right.
the community piece, like, and I'm always very transparent to this whenever I speak to a client initially. Like, I would hand on heart say one of the biggest reasons everybody within the group sees success is the group. Like, it goes beyond me. Like you said, I can give them the tools, but knowing they have a support network that goes beyond me, and knowing that there are other people to normalize whenever it's a shit show and whenever they have a bad day, and like that it's not always sunshine and rainbows and not everybody's having perfect weeks and hitting PRs. It's like understanding that there are other people that struggle and you're not the only one. I definitely think that sort of keeps people on track and sort of normalizes that not every week and not every day is going to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, having the tools to understand there are differences in an emotional eating feeling versus an emotional hunger. Emotional hunger is different than physical hunger. Like knowing those cues, knowing those signs. Like I think education is such an important part about understanding and moving beyond any of this. If you don't even know what's happening, how can you make progress? Because it just feels chaotic, right?
Yeah, I think that if we can delve a little bit deeper on that, because I know that I have clients that, they're stress eaters, or they don't eat when they're stressed, or they mindlessly eat whenever they're like doing a task or whatever. So what are some of the differences, or how can you tell the differences between, actually being hungry versus it being an emotional hunger?
So typically speaking, of course, physical hunger is gradual. Like, have you ever noticed those like initial pangs of hunger, but you can kind of ignore them for a bit and then it like increases a little bit. And then the next thing you know, like it's noon, it's definitely time to eat, right? Emotional hunger seems to come on quicker, right? It's like this sudden thing where you're like, I need a pint of ice cream, or I need, this whole bag of chips. And again, I'm talking in generals. I know there's always an exception, but like if I've been in an emotionally hungry state, I'm never craving a salad. I'm never craving salmon with a side of broccoli and, some blueberries for dessert, right? I want probably some chips because Americans love chips. Um, I want probably some candy. Um, you know, I don't want anything that's nutritious. Let's be honest, right? When I'm physically hungry, it is usually more rational, kind of thought out choices. It is like, actually now I am getting kind of hungry. I'm realizing it is kind of lunchtime now, but yeah, and you might realize, oh, it's been a minute since I've had something good to eat. Let me go get some baked chicken and a side of veggies for lunch. Versus I don't know. I'm just gonna grab whatever's in it's usually out of the pantry or out of the freezer, right? And we just, like you said, we end up mindlessly eating it. The other kicker is that we're not normally satisfied with emotional hunger. Like I can eat my lunch based off of physical hunger and be satisfied. Emotional isn't, because the emotional issue is still there. The stress, the loneliness, the boredom, whatever it is that triggered you didn't deal with. So that, and come on, chips are addicting, right? Salt is addicting, sugar is addicting. So of course we eat it and our body wants more of it anyway. It's not nutritious. So we're not getting really anything for our bodies, and it's not settling what's really going on. So that's one thing that's really important to kind of recognize is like, are you physically hungry? And usually you can wait. I mean, yes, blood sugar might you might start getting shaky. We all get hangry, but you can work through physical hunger if you have to. Emotional hunger is like, I have to fix this now.
Do you think it's like you said about the chips and the candy and stuff like that? Do you think it's those foods specifically because there's an attachment, like a relationship with those foods, or is that, I guess it's a person dependent thing, but is it like that's my go-to because this will give me a feeling that I'm searching for?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it's of course person dependent, but I think there is something too about probably the chemical makeup of some of those foods. Like we know that the brain needs sugar, right? I mean, to function, we know that. but like, what is it about what's the psychology behind these crunchy, salty, or overly sweet? Is that releasing chemicals in our brain that does seem like it's filling that emotional need, and then it creates that loop, right, where it is like addictive physically, but then emotionally, food's a drug, right? Which is why, in the States, we have the Food and Drug Administration. So that, again, they lump heroin in with food, right? Because it changes brain chemistry. So you eat, whether it's healthy or not, something's happening chemically in your brain. I can only assume, with a lot of these salty, sugary things, that there's just, I don't know, more of a satisfaction when it comes to the emotional side of it.
It's interesting too. I think a lot of people don't realize how much food they're actually eating. They just go back and forth with it, right? So it's like, oh, I feel like I'm hungry or I'm bored. I'm going to go to the thing and get some chips or whatever. My son is a great example. I came downstairs. He's playing video games, and I see like 5 things of chips and like 4, like Pepsis. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So we banned all that, but he's like, I don't even remember eating it or drinking all that. He's like, I just get up and go get it, and I come back and I drink it, and I'm just, I don't pay attention. And we have like a lot of those distractions. One thing that I noticed, just starting off with Ben, was that I didn't even know how many calories I was eating. I thought I was eating healthy, right? And then you start to like break things down, and you're like, whoa, I'm eating 4,000 calories a day. My body only needs 2,000 calories a day. That's a problem. And so I have to figure out how to, not just go and grab food from the pantry, or if I am a little bit hungry, it's okay, because I really only need 2,000 calories, and the discipline to stick to that. And I think what you'd mentioned earlier before, Allison, around our bodies fight change is the most competing issue that we see across the health and fitness side of the house for human. I mean, we have the most the United States, most obese people we've ever had, in unhealthiness, cardiovascular issues, cancers, you name it. We're not a healthy society, and we're continuously, our average death rate, our age keeps dropping in comparison to other countries. So this is very much so a problem across the board and across the world, not just in the United States, but predominantly, here as well. And for me, it took a pattern and a framework and accountability, and having to do that each day to where my body and my brain stopped fighting me on it, right? And you look at like resistance training, for example, actually going to the gym. People hate going to the gym, right? But eventually, after a while, you start to like going to the gym, and your brain changes and recognizes you're doing something good for yourself. And that chemistry, that the neural pathways in your brain start to forge new ones that allow us to enjoy the benefits of resistance training or working out or cardiovascular work. Same thing for eating. You get used to eating, and your body fights you for a long period of time. In fact, as you're dropping the weight, it intentionally slows you down. As far as twitching or movement or the desire to go and exercise, that starts to creep downward because your body's trying to fight, all the fat stores it's trying to keep and everything else. So it lowers your total daily energy expenditure. And so we're actually designed to fail at this, from a predisposition, from a human being perspective. So, you kind of have to overcome all of that and realize, like, hey, I do this one day, it's not going to change. I do this 2 days, it's not going to change. But if you keep doing it, it will change. And that might be a month from now, it might be 2 months from now. But you have to hold yourself accountable, and at least start off small and start to make little changes that allow you to have, big results down the road that end up allowing you to, be healthy, to live longer, to have the energy for your kids and family, to do all the things that you want to do, and kind of break that cycle. But I don't think that happens without, the knowledge, as well as, the accountability and persistence. And some people could do that on their own. But what I found is having a trainer, having a community, that to me was like one of the biggest areas that made me successful in what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, a problem that we're up against is diet culture, right? Where
Oh my
it'll
gosh.
happen. I mean, here's
You said the D word. You said the D word.
Well, because, hey, I can also give you
That's true. 100%
the woman's perspective on this too, right? Of diet culture, and for the decades of my life that I spent thinking that, if I lifted weights, I would get bulky. I mean, it makes me cringe
true.
now.
Yeah,
When
that's what everybody thinks.
I was that girl, and anyway, that's a whole other episode. But yeah, diet culture, right? Because it's the quick fix. I mean, what's the category of what Ozempic? It's a subglutide. What's it called? Yeah, is that right?
Well, semaglutide, and then there's also not tesofensine. There's the other one, the Moderna one as well. That's tirzepatide.
Yeah.
Those are the two like leading GLP agonist receptors. That basically cause you not to be hungry anymore, right?
Right. And, and I don't want to talk about things that I'm not trained to talk about, but that's part of the diet culture, right? And so if I can just do that and I don't have to do the hard work, well, I want to do that, because you're exactly right. I can't just go to the gym once and expect that things are going to change. If anything, things may go the wrong way the very first time I go to the gym, because like you said, body doesn't like change. And if you're doing things to it, its ultimate threat is death, right? And if it gets the idea that you might be trying to starve it or take away fat stores or reserves, it's going to shut that down. And so, once isn't enough, twice isn't enough. You're right. Sometimes 2 months is what it takes. Most people don't want to do that, because if I can hop on to Amazon and hit order and it comes to my house the same day, why am I going to want to join a gym or join a support group or come to therapy, listen to my therapist, right? When when I can inject myself with something that's going to wreck my GI but make me lose 10 pounds. So that's, I think, a lot of what you guys are surely up against in your profession, and what I often feel like I'm up against too, and like the mental part of it, because it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's interesting that
until it's not hard, right? Like, it's not hard for me to go to the gym because I want to see my friends.
Yeah.
I love seeing my friends. I love getting the stressors out of the day. I love that I'm setting a great example for my daughters. I love that I can keep functioning when my knees hurt most days, but certain decades bring that about, right? But I love going because
if I miss a day, if I miss a day in the gym, I feel like I have missed a year, and I've gotten set back, forever.
We need to talk about that on another episode, Dave.
Yeah, that is definitely an issue. Like, we should talk about that. And why when I'm bulking do I feel like I'm super fat? When I'm cutting, I'm super skinny, and I can't find the meat. Anyways, we got a whole lot to dissect there.
You're a guy, and you have other desires.
Yeah.
I feel like this could be a good series. We have definitely got more than one episode here.
We're gonna be with Dave here in a little bit of his.
But I think what you're saying around that, and one thing that I come up against is, people who have tried diets in the past and have failed, whether it's they didn't put enough time in, they didn't have the right education, they just didn't know what they're doing, or they just didn't follow it or do it properly. They have this like mental block of like, well, if I sign up with you, why is this any different? So it's like, I've failed so many times before, why is this time going to be any different?
Yeah.
What's the thought process behind that? Like, how do we overcome that?
That's a super good question, because it's true. I mean, I think that I would probably ask the same question. Well, I've tried this so many times before. Why would I try to learn this again? So then maybe, that's where we bring, so right, definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So I would look at, well, what have you done? Right? So this didn't work. Break it down for me. What did you do this time? Okay, what did you do the last time? What was your plan for the next time? And try to see, are there similarities? Are there differences? Can we throw a wrench into this plan that puts them on a different trajectory? So why are we failing? Do we have, it's like recovering alcoholics. They tell you, you're going to have to start avoiding persons, places, and things that encouraged this lifestyle. So, is your partner buying all the pints of ice cream and bringing donuts home and stocking the pantry with chips when you're over here trying to not? Chips are good. I don't want to give chips a bad name. If you want chips, eat chips. Everything in moderation.
I have an issue with wheat thins. So wheat thins, and I can't just eat two. I got to eat the whole box. So
I like pizza. We have pizza every Friday night in my house.
I think
sometimes
just
we have wine with it.
Even to touch on that, like the one big difference I think I give people is that we keep those things in. Like, we don't demonize the food. So if you come and we were having a call and you're like, okay, right, I want to do this, this, and this, but every week as a family we have pizza, I'm like, cool, we'll keep that in, because the first thing that people want to do when they go on a diet or they're trying to health kick, lose journey, whatever it is, they just take out all the foods that they love the most. I'm like, what a miserable existence. Like, it doesn't need to be that way.
Totally miserable. Yeah. Who wants to live? I mean, listen, we're not promised tomorrow. Like, I'm not going to die on the hill of I'm never eating pizza again, you know, because.
Well, you know, the fitness industry, though, and I think the diet industry and what you're talking about has really demonized that. They said, well, you can't eat your trigger foods, right? Which is bullshit. Yes, sorry. And on my side, because, you know, if you look at like one of the people I follow very heavily is his name is Dr. Lane Norton. He's got a number of published studies. He's crazy on social media. He's hilarious. He just like feeds the trolls and keeps going after him. But you know, he's a natural power lifter. Does like, you know, 800-pound, you know, deadlifts at 41 years old.
Oh my gosh.
But he focuses on the, if it fits your macros, it's good to go, right? So if you're gonna, you know, eat some pizza, well, great. Just don't eat 10 pieces of pizza, right? And don't do that every day, right? And you know, recognizing, you know, you look at The Rock, and The Rock, you know, has his cheat weekends where he, you know, eats fairly consistent across the week, and then he eats like, you know, pancakes and desserts, you know, for the weekend. So, you know, but he's still staying within the baselines of calories that he needs. You know, he's getting the nutrition and the proteins that he needs because he's focusing on what he's eating. But, you know, he doesn't cut out things because it's a trigger food for them. Well, cool. Like, if you like pizza, if you like hot dogs and hamburgers, if you like, you know, cake, cool. Just don't eat a whole cake, right? You know, just, you know, within reason.
And I think when you bring it back to like emotional eating, I mean, yeah, maybe early on in some of this journey, perhaps we shouldn't be, you know, stocking the pantry full of all these things when you're working at home. You don't have your accountability partner or group with you readily available. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've got to quit shaming food for what it is. You know, eat the donut. Like, you're going to be okay, right? But you don't need the whole dozen of them.
Be right back. I'm actually going to go get a donut that's in the lobby right now.
You're welcome. Yeah, and that's the shame. And I think shame is the biggest piece of this whole like emotional eating umbrella, because it creates the cycle, and it's so like chicken or egg. I don't like which came first. You eat, let's say, you know, 3 donuts, and now you're feeling bad about it because somewhere somebody told you that that's a terrible thing to do. So then you feel really shitty about it. Now you're shaming yourself. Well, there's a huge chunk of negative emotion. So what do? I eat 3 more donuts because I'm trying to soothe this uncomfortable feeling of shame. And now I just ate more donuts, and now I feel it's awful. It is a horrible, horrible cycle.
And on top of that, when you start to build these habits, right? What people will think of is like, especially if you're going to the gym, for example, oh, I'm going to go today. And I don't. Well, it's just one day. And then the second day you're like, well, I still lived yesterday. I'm okay. I'm not going to go today. I'll go tomorrow. And then it becomes a month or 2 months or 3 months, and they never get back into the cycle again, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when you look at any of this, it's consistency. You know, it's being consistent with what you're doing and recognizing that if you're not consistent one time, that's cool. But, you know, try to get back onto being consistent again, right? If I miss the gym, you know, yes, I'm going to lose 10 years of gains, but, you know, I need to be consistent again going the next day, right? So, you know,
one day,
but, you know,
are we maybe catastrophizing a little bit?
No, it's true. It's true. Trust me. I feel like the weakest person ever when I don't do the gym for a day, but,
okay.
But, you know, I probably need to talk to you after this podcast and schedule time with you. But when you look at consistency, you know, everybody talks about discipline and consistency in different areas. It's being consistent with your eating habits. It's being consistent with, you know, what you're doing from a physical fitness perspective, and understanding that it's going to be a delayed gratification type of results. And there's been a lot of studies on people that focus on delayed gratification are typically more successful at almost everything that they do, including their jobs, you know, their families and everything else, because they recognize that, you know, a social media post, you're going to get 1 like and you're hitting that dopamine trigger. You know, that's your instant gratification, right? And that's destroying us from a social pattern behavior perspective. Everything else, pornography, another good example.
Yep.
You start looking at delayed gratification, whether it's, you know, spending time with your son, where you're like, man, I really hate baseball, but he loves it, and I'm going to teach him so that eventually I can watch him play baseball and be successful at it. That's delayed gratification, right? And you're proud
That's
of him for putting in the work. Same thing for, where I'm at in my fitness wise. I look back 3 years ago, I'm like, man, if 3 years ago Dave would have seen 3 years ago today, he'd be like, dude, I didn't even know it was impossible. Congratulations. So the delayed gratification piece, I think, is something that people need to recognize, is that these changes don't happen by going to the gym one day. It will eventually happen, and you'll eventually get better at it. You'll learn more. I didn't know everything that I know today. Cybersecurity is not a great example. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, like, you're just the most insanely smart person I've ever met in my life. I'm like, well, I've been in the industry for 20 years, and I have different experiences than you, right? You came through college and you're a year in. Trust me, you're way smarter than I am. Like, you have the potential to be tenfold more knowledge wise than I do if you keep busting your butt from a delayed gratification perspective to build your career up. And I think we're losing that a lot in our kids today. I don't think our kids have the discipline for delayed gratification, and I think that's really going to hurt our future leaders. What we're seeing from a health and fitness perspective, and success, just as a species, we're not having a great time with that.
Yeah, I agree. The delayed gratification is huge, and again, back to the Amazon thing. Like, I get impatient now that it takes a week for something to arrive. And you're right about the dopamine hit and the porn thing. That's a whole other topic for another time. But it's I want it and I want it now. And I can relieve this turmoil or this pain, this emotional pain, or I don't have to go to the gym. I can just give myself an injection and I can have the results that I want, except with emotional eating, you never get the results that you want. And ultimately any of, diet culture type stuff, you're not going to get that either. But yeah, we got to get back to, I might be old school, but we have got to get back to community, face to face, doing things with people. I saw this, well, then I'm going to bring up social media, but I saw this reel on Instagram, and they were talking a lot about how, 60, 70 years ago, there wasn't a gym on every corner. There, really not that many people you knew were in therapy. It was still, obviously a very young profession. We were not seeing, one of the first things you said, Dave, was about, the incidences of depression and diagnoses and things like that. Why is that? Because we would walk more places. We would get together with our neighbors. We had connection. If we're more secular than we ever have been before. And that's not to say, you must have organized religion, but like, what are you doing to fill that spiritual cup? Where is that connection? We've gotten so far away from a lot of that stuff. We're so isolated. COVID helped none of that, because now we can work from home. We all figured it out, right? And so, yeah, I sit all day. That's my profession. I do need a gym. Right? And I'm happy to do it. I have my own therapist. I'm a therapist. Life happens to me too, right? But what feels better than just getting together with a friend and like catching up in person, sharing a meal, or sharing, an activity, going to the gym with a buddy? Like, we are so far away from that. We're so isolated, and humans aren't meant for that. We wouldn't have never survived. If you were living in a cave by yourself in prehistoric times, you would have been eaten, or you would have been killed by somebody wanting your cave. And so we need people.
There's so much more superior animals from
unfortunately a big part of.
There's so many superior animals to humans when it comes to strength, being able to mull us over. If you're going one-on-one with the bear, you're screwed, right? But if we have a tribe of folks that are attacking the bear at the same time, our chances then go up. And we are very tribal creatures. And it's interesting because the change thing is actually drilled into our DNA, because usually if we're in a tribe, in a community, let's just say of 10 humans, we have our specific task that allows the rest of our tribe to survive. And so if we were changing tasks all the time, our tribe doesn't survive, because we're always all over the place.
Right. And like, so I get the berries, you go kill the animal, you're going to start the fire. Like, we have our expectations, we have our roles, and it kept us all alive.
Yep. And it's those types of things that, I think eventually maybe we evolve out of, maybe, because society has changed and technology has changed. But, a lot of this is core, structural patterns of behavior that, we don't have anymore because we don't have to fight for food. We don't have to starve. I always found the
Yeah.
interesting part, like what blew my brain out a little bit was a little bit around or blew my mind, I should say, a bit on the being hungry side of the house. That I would think as you get more and more hungry, your body would shut down, but it's actually the opposite, because as you starve yourself, your body actually, cleans up all of the toxins and everything. It actually gears your mind to be more, focused. It primes your muscles. You're high energy. Because if we didn't have that ability, we would just crawl in a hole and die. Now we're actually, ample apex hunters to go out and kill the animals that we need to forage for food. So, there's some benefits of not eating for a while or doing fasting or things of that effect every so often. That, we don't really flex that muscle because we have unlimited sources of food. So it's like all of these things that we've done to make our lives easier have really hurt us when it comes to a health and longevity perspective, mental health perspective. Again, rapid increase in depression. Why is that?
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to mention that I think it's important for all of us, but I think specifically to like the tech industry. So we have something called the stress cycle, and kind of talking about, prehistoric humans and all of that. So you're living in the cave, and here comes the bear, and all the stress hormones are released, and your body is preparing to fight or flee or freeze, or whatever it is it needs to do for survival. So that's
what we consider more of the primitive brain, right? The primitive brain pretty much reacts instantly to a specific threat.
Right. Yeah. So you don't even need to say like, hey, body, release cortisol, release adrenaline. I have a bear to fight. It just does it. Right. Yep. So bear's coming. We either kill bear or we run away from bear. And our eyes see that there is no longer a threat, because either we're looking at the dead body of a bear, or we have run so far away that now maybe we see that the bear is, way off in the distance, and we're fine. So stress cycle then becomes complete. You probably, they would have had their adrenaline dump. There may have been crying, there may have been shaking, etc. Their stress cycle is complete, maybe either by a celebration that, the cave is saved. There's some hugging, there's connection, there's camaraderie. Stress cycle is complete. We don't have that. Where is the completion of any of our stress cycles? Yes, taxes are stressful. I suppose if I file them, I'm a little bit less stressed. But where is the end of that strike? Where is the end of the rat race? Where is the end of? So what do? Well, we can still kind of simulate some of the completion of the stress cycle by releasing oxytocin and by connecting with our loved ones. So if you've had a really rough day, very stressed at work, ask your partner for a hug, right? Or friend, or your kids, or your, just somebody, right? Somebody that you're close to. Release some of that oxytocin. Of course, we know how else we can release oxytocin, right? But the gym, right? Create some endorphins, have intercourse, right? These are the ways that we can kind of fake the completion of the stress cycle. So we do need to make sure that every day we're having some sort of check-in to relieve that stress. So that's a huge piece for the busy working lives that we have, is that there's no dead bear on the floor in my office, right? Thank God. But
it's fascinating you bring that up, because I never really thought of that, because I always wondered, we have these stressors, and it seems like, from a human being perspective, we should be living in like heaven. Like this should be heaven right now for humans, because we have unlimited food. We don't have bears attacking us. We have everything available possible, but yet we still create these stress levels in our own selves, and we never shut that off, because we're just seeing the stress. Am I going to be able to afford rent this month? Oh my gosh, all this stuff is happening on the news, and we're getting bombarded with just negative energy. Social media, someone's attacking me or my kids. I have drama with a parent. all of these things, and it never shuts off.
Right.
And that is so dangerous, I think, for us as humans. It's the most amount of stress we've ever received, being probably in our existence of being smart. So
Yeah, and to your point earlier about like the chronic diseases that we're seeing, I mean, yes, of course, diet, preservatives, et cetera, but I mean, stress is obviously a component too. The inflammatory diseases, autoimmune is on the rise. I mean, we can't ignore the fact that the stress is just wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's hard, of course. I mean, we've all heard the excuses of time, right? I don't have enough time. And that's probably true because time doesn't yield itself to us. Time doesn't just say, here you go, here's an hour where you can go to the gym, or here's an hour where you can have a happy hour or go to your book club or whatever. You have to take it. And that's like such a huge thing I try to tell clients all the time. Like, nobody's going to just hand you this. You have to demand the time or it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think with the time thing, and again, I see this all the time. Like, I'll have an initial call and someone's like, you know what, I can only train for 27 minutes on a Tuesday morning and that's it. And I'm like, okay, cool, we'll start with that. And then all of a sudden, a couple of months later, they're like, oh, I have like, an hour every single day. Like, what can I do? And it's like, well, why is it like nothing has changed except for the fact I've actually given you more stuff to do?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, I hear that. And the stress, especially in your industry, is bonkers. There's so much pressure. There's so many demands. There's so much clearance and responsibility. And whenever your clients are starting to feel like that, those levels rise, I mean, that's where they have to start learning how to be more proactive to resolve some of those emotions. Like, just get up then. I get that maybe you're in the middle of something and you can't go for a walk or it's hot as hell, but like, get up, do some burpees, shake it out, like move your body, do something, call a friend and say, I'm having a really stressful day. Like, do anything to try to pause before you then go grab the food. Stop, like, give yourself 5 minutes to try to do something else that's going to actually address what's happening. If you're bored, read, go for a walk, surf the internet for like some new information. If you're feeling lonely, reach out to someone. But these are the things obviously that you have to work through, like on my side of things, because people are sometimes, well, they come up, well, I don't know, I don't want to bother her, so I don't really want to call her. Those are a lot of things that we kind of have to work through.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess to wrap it up and to take it back to the conversation about donuts, if I'm in the situation where I have just eaten three donuts and I feel guilty about it, like what's a practical solution? Like, what's the fix for that? Do you mean, how do I get myself out of that cycle of feeling guilty and feeling shame and wanting to eat more donuts to make myself feel better? Like, what's an advice that I can give someone that's in that situation?
So I think there's a big difference between shame and guilt. So guilt to me is kind of the better case scenario because guilt is actionable. Like, if I feel guilty because I forgot your birthday, okay, I can do something about that. I can put your birthday next year on my calendar. I can set an alarm. I can whatever, right? Post-it notes. I can somehow remind myself to never forget your birthday again. So guilt is actionable. Like, oh, I made a mistake. I'm going to do my best to never do that again. So if you're feeling guilty about the donuts, that's a better case scenario because now we can take from that and move it forward and go, okay, not going to do that again. It's okay. It's in the past, but that was a mistake. Moving forward. Shame is a whole, that's a lot of the I statements. Like, I'm a screw up. What's wrong with me? I can't, I'm such a shitty person. I can't even remember your birthday. Like, what's wrong with me? I'm not even worth this friendship. Like, whoa, that's a totally different situation, right? What do you do with that? And so I think that you, me, anybody else that kind of has clients, you have to really work on getting them out of that feeling of the lack of worthiness, right? And recognizing that mistakes are mistakes and we all make them. And it's no reflection on you as a person. And so that's a very simple answer. And it's, I mean, it obviously takes many sessions, but it's that distinction of like, you are not your mistake, right? The mistake is not to then beat up yourself about, it's to learn from, right? And then certainly shaming yourself and then eating more of the things that you're shaming yourself for, we got to stop that cycle. So I think if they can become a little bit more in tune to how they're feeling, is this physical hunger, is this emotional hunger? Okay, it's emotional. And we can start working like on that avenue and getting those clients to try something else first. Maybe that's, a great way to stop that cycle. So
my go-to in a situation like that is I just send them like a short YouTube clip of the Lion King when Rafiki hits him in the head with a coconut, and then the second time he misses him and he learns from a mistake. Like that's always my go-to. It tends to hit most times, but not every single time.
I like.
Who thought that the Lion King would save the day?
Those good analogies in there.
Anything else from you, Dave?
No, that was great. I mean, I think putting it together on forming habits that are good for you, support systems, people you can talk to, human relationships, social interactions, those all will help, beneficially of how we're, programmed. And, again, if it doesn't work once, keep doing it over and over again. And eventually, your brain will start to like it. I'm not saying, don't do things that you fail at all the time, but, at least going to the gym or, keeping in a structure of counting calories, or focusing on protein centric first, or, when it comes to anxiety, just starting off small, might be, going to a local library event just to see people there. There's things that you can do to, I think, structure a lot of this. And, just know you're not alone. There's a lot of people out here struggling with the same thing you are, and it's possible to make a change. And,
that's right.
Allison has obviously a lot more experience than we do on this. And, she focuses on this. So Allison, how do people get a hold of you if they're interested in, learning more?
Well, certainly I'm, definitely available to answer any questions that anybody might have. As far as therapy goes, though, they would have to be clients of yours that are licensed in Texas, because I'm only licensed in Texas. And so you know how that works. But I can give you my email address if that's best. It's, do you want me to give that to you?
I can put it in the notes if it's easier. I can put it in the notes. It's fine for people to reach out.
Okay, yeah. The email address you have for me is fine. If anybody just has questions about, well, how do I even find a therapist, right? Where do I even start? I'm happy to help facilitate, anything like that. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I would imagine there's definitely more to come from this conversation. Dave has a few unresolved issues, and potentially myself. But yeah, thanks. I think this will be a huge, true, a hugely beneficial episode. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem at all.